If I can just begin this discussion with maybe a 3 to 4 minute opening statement by each of our participants on what exactly the digital empowerment means to you. Has it, I mean, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Just a short opening statement, and then we can go on to a slightly more, I mean, some specific questions. If I can begin with you, Meenakshi.
Thank you, Sunil. I represent New Delhi, which is one of the most digitally literate constituency of the country. So obviously, you have to keep up with the challenges, and you have to be answerable to a huge section. Everybody, almost 90% households will have a cell phone, will also have internet connectivity, so they obviously look for 3G and 4G and better services. And that was the campaign on which I worked on before elections. And the first railway station which got Wi-Fi was New Delhi railway station. The first markets to have free Wi-Fi, it started with Khan Market and Connaught Place. So I tried experimenting in small ways. I came up with this bright dream that everybody can be connected because it's difficult to meet up every constituent of your constituency. So I came up with this app called Constituency Connect, and thought it will be a great idea. Didn't know where the whole thing will lead up because that was the first launch and that was a huge launch. I need to rework because end of the day, the problems which people are facing, they don't realize whether it's MP's job, it's MLA's job, it's a corporator's job. They connect to you because they think they have voted for you and this person is accessible to me. Now, it's impossible to explain that, look, Jal Board does not lie with me. And I cannot tell Delhi administration, though I do tell Delhi administration, but Delhi administration will respond to me. So it's not about whether politicians are ready for this digital connectivity or not. There is some amount of bureaucratic lethargy also which is set in. And that bureaucratic lethargy, unless compelled to change its ways, it's not one-way traffic. It's the constituents, it's the politician, and finally the job needs to be done by the bureaucracy. And I'll share one personal experience and you'll say, you'll probably not like that. We as MPs, we get some MP lad fund and we immediately sign it off that, okay, do this project, do that project. But how that project needs to be carried on, I had the idea that everybody in my constituency should get health services and it should have a GPS system and also where it is located, where it is traveling, what kind of diseases are there, what kind of recurrence of diseases, everything needs to be analyzed, monitored. They are simply not delivering. So delivery of services lies a whole lot with the bureaucratic setup. So it's not just the politician or the constituent, the bureaucracy needs to evolve simultaneously. And in that entire process, it has to be a coordinated effort. And certainly, when we put in that effort, the governance system can definitely improve. And it's not just about e-commerce. Most people are talking about e-commerce. I think, yes, the numbers are going to rise, people are going to make money, it's going to be accessible, all that is fine. But I look at it more from the point of view of government. The governance systems need to improve, and the best way of improving the governance system and taking to the most deprived, which has not happened for 60 years, is the Jan Dhan Yojana person who has a small bank account. That's where the subsidy needs to go. That's where the health card needs to be connected. That's where the facilities in terms of banking, small accounts, that's where we need to work at. And that's why the Digital Bharat is a great plan. The optical fiber network is under direct monitoring of the Prime Minister's office. And I'm sure we are likely to do well, and more governance will reach the places it is supposed to reach.
Let me first answer your question as to what does a digitally empowered India mean to me is disintermediation in politics and in governance. What does that mean? In politics, for instance, it means that you don't need to have a family network of 3 generations as a politician to have a ground presence. With increasing numbers of your constituents being online or being accessible through digital media, you can build your networks even as a first generation politician, even as somebody who doesn't have the traditional networks. What does it mean for governance? What it means for governance is that huge amount of every rupee that is spent by the government which leaks away, doesn't reach the beneficiary. Sunshine is going to be shone on it now. Because the more things are digital, the more things that are accessible to the people, the more that you disintermediate, whether it is a bureaucracy or you disintermediate whoever is the system through which it trickles down, then it becomes more accessible. So common people are becoming much more aware of what the government is spending and what is not reaching them. We have fundamental challenges in getting a digitally empowered India. And it's not just this. This is just to highlight how updated some of our policymakers are on some of these issues. You talked about net neutrality. When the net neutrality issue broke, only a few handful of us actually initially raised our voice. And then subsequently, a lot of people raised their voice, but because they recognized that it stood for some kind of a social justice, but didn't really understand the nuances. Yeah. Now, you don't necessarily need every MP to understand the nuances of something like net neutrality until it becomes a hot topic. That's all right. I don't hold that against anybody. But the whole idea of being resistant to using digital infrastructure to communicate with your people is bizarre. But even today, you have in 2015, many MPs coming online for the first time. And I can understand 5 years ago when MPs were resisting, saying Twitter is a fad or Facebook is a fad. But certainly, in the last 1 or 2 years, it should have become clear that it is not a fad, it is having an impact on elections. So let me conclude by giving 1 or 2 more examples. Rural India is catching up. Obviously, of the nearly 300 million people that are on the internet, I think the numbers are closer to 275. Of the nearly 300 million people that Meenakshi was referring to, most are urban. The rural internet subscription is probably about 50 million, is the information that we have. This is going to dramatically change in the coming years. And a lot of MPs still think that India is mostly rural, which technically is really not true anymore. And a lot of MPs still think that since my rural constituents don't have Twitter, it's not so relevant to me. And I'll tell you why that's not true. So starting 6 years ago, when I changed from Rajya Sabha to Lok Sabha, I've had a database of several lakh telephone numbers, mobile numbers. So I have them sliced down to profession, teachers for example, location, block, or panchayat. And for the last 6 years, I've been communicating with my constituents and people around my state on SMS because they didn't have Twitter or social media. But what has happened in the last 1 year, just 1 year, there has been a dramatic surge of the use of WhatsApp in my rural constituency. So we have WhatsApp groups today, something called Kendrapada News, for instance, which has got thousands of participants. And they give out their own spiel, which totally dramatically changes the dialogue that we have been having so far in my constituency by way of these small rural newspapers and the TV channels, both regional and national. Now, WhatsApp is not a new thing for us in Delhi, because it's been around for 5-7 years and we've had groups on WhatsApp for a long time. But WhatsApp is very new in rural India. And as this 50 million goes to 100 million, goes to 200 million, goes to 300 million people that have access to broadband or access to any kind of internet access in rural India, Twitter, Facebook, and other new forms that will come up will have a dramatic impact on how we politicians engage with our constituents. Thanks.
Thanks. Manish, what Jay basically talked about was the idea ad several years ago, which basically has a politician coming and saying something, and then some guy has taken a video of it long ago, and he says, you said the same thing when you came when you came 5 years ago. So he said basically, no more ullu banayenge. So what Jay is really saying is that social media is not letting you ullu banayenge anymore. So I mean, is that the sort of experience that you have? Have you had the kind of experience that Jay is talking about in terms of how your constituency is reacting to you, how they are asking you questions? Are the questions they're asking you a lot more different today than they were in the past?
Well, Sunil, first of all, let me thank you for having me here. I must say that we have, as Indians, have a very funny concept about Generation Next. I'm pushing 50, I'm about to retire. and I'm generation next.
You come,
so
from,
therefore,
you come from the background of the youth congress, so it's okay. Youth is a relative term.
so therefore, I really do not know what generation next really means, but be that as it may. Internet is one of those creations of humankind which humankind understands less and less as it mutates. And the one thing which the net has done over the past 15 years, and that's where it has a direct impact on political processes, is that it has decentralized power from the state, from the institutions to the individual. Never before in the history of humankind has so much power concurrently resided on so many fingertips around the world. So I think that's the big paradigm shift which the net has been able to bring. The difficulty with policymakers who deal with the net, and I'll come to the impact later, is that they try and impose the rules of Westphalian civilization to a virtual world. I think one thing which we are not able to comprehend is that inadvertently we've ended up creating a virtual civilization. That virtual civilization has its own rhythm, it has its own dynamics, and it has its own norms. And it is not going to be susceptible to the rules of human conduct as we know them or as we've institutionalized them. Now, how is it going to change the constituent representative or the people-politician relationship? Is that there is obviously a greater degree of interface. I'm not saying there's a greater degree of accountability, because a greater degree of accountability would only come if at some point in time the political system feels that the right of recall should be incorporated in the Representation of People's Act. But yes, it does bring about a greater degree of interface. People are not only able to weigh in on specific issues, specific problems, but more importantly, even instruct their representatives as to what their preferences are on a particular issue. So I guess, in a manner, it is not only empowering for the people. In a manner, the whole paradigm shift of communications has been increasingly empowering for the representative, because if he is in touch, if he keeps his ear to the ground, he doesn't have to go around a constituency of 1.5 billion people. He can get a fair sense of where people stand on various issues. And yes, most importantly, what has happened is that the top-down discourse, the discourse of anchoritis, the discourse of editorialitis, that has been completely democratized. So therefore, you have the mainstream media, which is now held accountable by the new media or the grassroots media which has come up. And increasingly going forward, my own sense is that the mainstream media is only going to become an ISO 9002 standard or an ISI standard, whereby they would be putting the stamp of credibility on the very low grade of information which is proliferating all across. For example, if the guy who live tweeted the entire Osama bin Laden raid would have been in some manner graded, and his tweets would have been picked up by the mainstream media, and you could have actually had a kind of a live overview as the operation unfolded. I mean, the reason I give the Osama bin Laden example is because of what Harsh has written recently. So coming back to the constituency interface, I think any politician would really ignore it at his own peril. With 243.2 million people online in India, 3 billion across the world. Numbers, over the next 1 decade, almost going up to 7 billion. It's going to be a completely different world. And yes, you can afford to stay unconnected. I mean, in the sense that you can, if you want, still disappear. But there is going to be a premium on that disappearance. And the premium on that disappearance is that while you will disappear for the people, if you're a politician, the people may disappear for you. So I will just leave it at that.
Yeah, Pavan, sorry.
No, I think the one lesson we all learned after the last election and the use of media, social media platforms by the then prime ministerial candidate of the current ruling party is that no politician can ignore the social media. There was a time, and I can speak this about leaders, for instance, in UP and Bihar, where their only form of not insignificant political campaigning was poster rally. And then they saw the remarkable and tremendous potential and indeed impact of the use of these new instruments. And so to answer the question that has been posed to us, are we ready to embrace a digitally empowered India, Gen Next? I think the answer to that is that you don't have an option. If in 2001 there were 7 million internet users, and if today that figure has gone up by 7 or 8 times, and if 40 million, 50 million Indians are online every day, if 30 million new people are adding to the digital world, cyber world, year on year in India, how can people who deal with people, politicians who deal with people, ignore this tool? So they have to be prepared for it. My real question is, are they prepared for it? I see a great many politicians who really are not aware. And I think one of the reasons for it is because we are quick learners for new technology which empowers us and helps us to leapfrog what would be the conventional evolutionary pattern in development. We can take to new technologies. And I tell you, when the mobile subscribers came to Bihar, there was a great deal of cynicism whether this poor state would adapt my mobile technology. And to my own surprise, when I checked the figures, the total electorate of Bihar is some 5.6 crore, and the total number of mobile subscribers is 5.54 crores. So it has been one of the fastest growing industries. People learn to use it. People adopt the technology. But have they created enough pressure on the politicians? I wonder. Is there a hype involved here? I mean, to create a digital India, which is a laudable goal, you need broadband highways. You need universal mobile coverage if possible. You need public internet access. You need supply of power. You need funds. I mean, at one estimate is 70,000 crores, 80,000 crores is the estimate to provide the, those fiber linkages to all gram panchayats. So, where is the money? You need digital literacy, also education. How many people in a constituency are today constituting a critical mass vital enough for a politician to equip and adapt himself to respond? Beyond those who come from Delhi or from urban areas. I agree that the smallest town is now the largest village, and vice versa. There is a blurring of lines, but that is still one of the issues that we need to face. And so I am saying there is a third factor here, and I'll end here, Sunil. There is also some degree of discounting going on of the message being conveyed through the social media platforms of a digitized India. The kind of, you said fingers, what was your terrific expression? Fingers on keyboard. Or, yeah. And these are very filthy fingers very often. The kind of messages that are being communicated, the kind of coordinated attack, the kind of misinformation that is being spread. And many politicians face it day in and day out. And it's easy to organize. I'm told there is an office where 500 people work 24/7 whose only job is to do this. And so politicians also are developing, in a sense, an antibody to this. I know of stories of misinformation. I know we all can become gullible to it. Or not necessarily. I mean, there was 2 days ago a picture, a very inflammatory clip that came on television of a policeman using a brick at a woman. It's shocking. Anybody who saw it was outraged. And then the nuances of it is coming out. I don't know what version is true, and I'm not interested except that the police should behave itself, and especially where women are concerned. But the fact is that nuances of that truth, which was projected as self-evident and beyond question, is happening in 48 hours of that incident. So there are the minuses also of a digitized media. I mean, I'm talking in the context of politicians. I have no doubt, and I'll finish here, that it is an exceptionally empowering tool. And if it can equip, forget politicians, if it can equip citizens to hold politicians to account, I think politicians will take greater notice of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Pavan.